Hi everyone, good day. We're back on the show after a few weeks of holidays in Russia, and Dr. Shamil's been away. I trust that you had a great break. Welcome back. And so many things are happening in around the world, Dr. Shamil. Welcome back to Statecraft in Motion. But recently, there has been, of course, the big thing in the last couple of weeks was the meeting, the SEO meeting in Beijing, where a Western media, and I quote what they actually said about this big uh, agreement, okay, between Russia and China was the signing of the Power of Siberia 2, or what they call the POS 2 gas pipeline, and that would actually link China, and I'm going to post the map on the podcast for the benefit of our audience, is that it's going to link China right through from China through Mongolia and into the Yamal region, and the length of the POS2 is actually about 2,600 kilometers, and that would carry gas supplies up to 50 billion cubic meters annually, uh, right up from the northern China into Russia via East Mongolia. And just for the benefit of our Malaysian listeners, 2,600 kilometers is the distance between, say, Kuala Lumpur to Manila, or Kuala Lumpur to, say, Hanoi, which is the northern part of Vietnam. So it's a very long pipeline, and it's a very ambitious one because the agreement, I believe, is designed to last 30 years. And in fact, the amazing thing is that the first delivery is going to be targeted at 2030, which is only shy of 5 years. So it's a very ambitious plan, and it's going to be a very big one. So, Dr. Shamil, maybe perhaps you can explain to us the significance of the Yamal Peninsula, and how is that um, how important is this region to Russia?
Yes, good morning from Moscow and good afternoon in Malaysia. Yeah, I think this pipeline is very significant. I think one important aspect first I'd like to mention is that this pipeline is vital for both Russia and China for different reasons. For Russia, obviously, it's an important way of pivoting to the east, so to speak. The strategy that Russia started a while ago, but which accelerated after the start of the special military operation, the worsening of relationship, between Russia and the European Union, because as you know, European Union has been a traditional client base for Russian gas deliveries, and a lot of those gas deliveries came exactly from this, region in the Yamal Peninsula, and that region has vast reserves of natural gas, and so that's it's not only used for delivery of gas by pipeline, but also it's part of another sort of other projects such as Yamal LNG, liquefied natural gas. So for China, it's an important way of meeting several issues. I mean, one of the issues is becoming diversified in terms of the supply base, because China gets natural resources from several sources, from Central Asia via the Turkmenistan China gas pipeline. Then it gets from Myanmar, and from Russia by power Siberia, one pipeline, the first pipeline which was built a while ago, obviously for Russia it's an important aspect of finding a sort of alternative market for its traditional European base, because European Union, they've already said that they plan to completely stop purchases of Russian gas within the next 2 years, by the end of 2027. So obviously for Russia it's important to find a new client base. For China it's important to diversify its supply base, especially taking into account the kind of uneasy relationship between China and the United States.
Mm-hmm.
The US is also is an important supplier, even though not a significant supplier, but the US delivers about I think 6% of Chinese demand when it comes to LNG deliveries of US LNG, and obviously the Chinese, and we'll move into that territories later on when we talk about the potential tariff wars. I think China is also wary of becoming sort of exposed, to potential problems with deliveries of hydrocarbons by sea, if there is some kind of geopolitical conflict in your region. So I think that's an important aspect. Another important thing is that obviously this is a huge project, 50 billion cubic meters of gas, and it's not been an easy project to basically implement. It's been in discussions for quite a long time. It's been suggested that it will be about 5 to 7 years to complete. So that's basically the overall kind of picture. But also, I mean, I think the most important thing, it really very much helps China to also decarbonize its economy, to move to more gas, gasification of its regions as well, and also an important aspect in terms of pricing in the domestic market, and potentially that could also affect pricing for LNG deliveries to China. It's got a much bigger story, which again we can just talk about later. The overall development of Northeast Asian gas market, which is dominated by three players: China, South Korea, and Japan as LNG buyers. So that's important. That's another important aspect. And obviously, it gives China in some ways a competitive advantage when it comes to technological evolution of its position on a global scale, because one of the most important aspects in the next few years will be the price of your energy, which you use for data centers, which you use for technological innovations and things like that. And I think that we will see competition between China and the United States in that respect, because the US will be interested in lowering the domestic prices, so will be the Chinese. So I think that's another important aspect, that they'll have a kind of competitive edge. For Europe, it's another story. I think that sadly for Europe, I think that as you see, because of this challenging relations between Europe and Russia, prices in Europe are probably some of the highest in the world now, especially like if we look at the larger Europe, including the UK. UK has some of the highest now energy prices. Germany has pretty high prices. So these are.
I think I've seen a chart that says that the electricity bill, household bills, in the UK is the highest in the world.
Yes, but it also affects not only households. It also affects,
So
your
manufacturing.
competitiveness. I mean, Europe for many years, especially after the sort of 1973 oil price shock when Arab nations imposed embargo on uh, on oil deliveries to developed countries. Because of the Yom Kippur War, because of the war between Arab-Israeli war,
Yeah.
because developed countries supported Israel.
Hmm.
That's basically forced Europe to look elsewhere to try to diversify its resource base and its supply base. And so we see many similarities to current kind of climate situation, but in a different sort of way. And as an alternative, Europeans realized that they can actually bring gas from the Soviet Union that will give them a competitive edge. And indeed, it
Mm.
actually fueled European economic growth. 60s, 70s, and 80s. Despite there was some economic hiccups, but it provided them with a kind of competitive advantage. Those gas deliveries from the Soviet Union, and obviously they were profitable for the Soviet Union as well.
Mm.
So there is always when I think when policymakers make decisions about supplies, they obviously geopolitics is important, especially now it's becoming increasingly important. In the 70s, despite sort of also quite tense relationship with the Soviet Union, because obviously the Soviet Union was a communist state, and in Europe was a capitalist kind of bloc of countries. So that's despite that the deliveries they were never interrupted. But now obviously the story is somewhat different. We've reached really the heights of geopolitical conflict in that respect. But it will be also interesting.
Right.
We're also seeing one important aspect of this deal is that potential involvement of Russian companies in Chinese financial kind of system, issuing of bonds in Chinese yuan for
Mm.
to facilitate trade, to facilitate development of projects in Russia. I think that's also an important part of this deal, and it's quite a long-term project. I think that this project has been had quite a kind of long story of discussions. It's been I think in discussion for over 10 years. I think that one of the problems is that because this pipeline goes through Mongolia,
Hmm.
the Mongolian section is called Soyuz Vostok. I think there was some speculations the Chinese wanted to build it in order to speed up the process. But the problem is that Russians, I think, were not happy because they didn't want to sell gas at the Mongolian border. Of course, they
Right.
wanted to deliver it directly to China.
Mm.
Plus, there was an issue of pricing because for China it was important to create a kind of for them it's important to create a kind of price floor for
Mm.
gas deliveries, so that it could in the future through various kind of trading mechanisms could affect also other prices of gas, LNG, including being delivered to China.
Hmm.
And so that's also prolonged this kind of negotiations. But also the project is I mean, you can imagine 2,700 kilometers in Russia alone. This is this is not an easy project, to implement. It's going through, harsh climates as well. It gets pretty severe there in the winter,
Yeah.
in the winter time. So
Hmm.
I think that we should view this project through a prism of closer ties between Russia and China. I think we can probably even talk about some kind of strategic alliance, or I wouldn't call it alliance. Let's call it strategic relationship, because I think
Mm.
when people talk about alliances, they always think about the alliances against somebody else. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, that's right.
uh,
Mm.
so I think it's a strategic relationship because it's provides China with important energy sources from Russia, that could fuel its economy, that could provide China with a competitive edge, that
Mm.
could also deal with the issue of sort of environmental, some of the issues in large cities in China, issue of coal use, and decarbonization targets that China has agreed to implement under the various international agreements. So that's one important aspect. Second, so energy becomes kind of a link.
Mm.
The second aspect is finance. I already mentioned to you.
Yep.
There will be increased, I think, relationships between Russia and China in terms of some kind of financial arrangements, including use of various financial instruments between the two countries to basically finance trade operations and development of projects in their mutual relationship. And also, important aspect is that
Will the
China
and will
yes,
the settlements, will the payment settlements be done directly, i.e., with their own currencies?
I think that's. I think we're probably likely to see probably dual use of both Russian ruble and Chinese yuan. I think that's uh, it's important for Russia to and China to increase trade
Mm-hmm.
operation in that respect, so that they don't have too much currency on their hands, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
of the other countries, so they can use this for increasing mutual trade, not only in energy.
Mm.
The fact that the Chinese government implemented for the first time visa-free travel for Russians.
Yep.
It's a pilot project for 1 year, but I think that it will. We're already seeing. I mean, I've just been watching Russian television. I've been reading some Russian media outlets, and they're already saying that there is increased demand from Russian both tourists and businesses to go and travel to China. And the Russian Transport Ministry, I think they offered to Russian airlines and Chinese airlines to start operating between Russian cities and about, I think, over 40 cities, destinations within China. So imagine what kind of impact that's going to make on trade. I
Right.
think that's in some ways, I think that the fact that the Chinese are doing this 1 year pilot project for them is just to test the ground to see
Mm-hmm.
how much that's going to impact both economies.
Yep.
But I think it will impact my personal kind of estimate that I think that it will start changing things around considerably because Russians they love to travel. At the same time, what we're seeing in Europe discussions of closure of literal closure of European the whole of European space for Russian tourists.
Mm-hmm.
They've been talking about abandoning the Schengen visa arrangements for Russians.
Right.
So, and as a result, obviously, less and less people will be traveling to Europe, and they'll be traveling to Asian countries,
Mm-hmm.
including China.
In fact, I had someone who just came back from Vladivostok, and they were actually very surprised how expensive things were in Vladivostok. Given that it's so near to Beijing, you would expect that things would be actually cheaper. Goods and services would be cheaper than Moscow. But actually, it's the other way around. When the port city is only 2.5 hours from Beijing. So maybe this is one of the things that could happen that it could help zone three cities to have more affordable prices.
Yes, you put it right. In the Soviet times, we had three zones for pricing, even when there were state prices for goods and services. And even back then, if you look at, for example, on packages of juice or milk or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or butter, it would give three different prices. Zone one, this price. Zone one, it was the cheapest price, which is the center of Russia, like Moscow, Leningrad at the time, St. Petersburg, basically the central part, the European part of Russia. Then my region, the Urals, where I come from, was
Mm-hmm.
a second kind of region, tier, and then the third one was the far Russian Far East. I think that until recently as well, one of the problems of Russia was that people even who had, let's say, cities located in the Far East or in the Urals, they
Mm-hmm.
had to travel to Moscow to change the flights, even though they had to go to a city nearby. So I think that was another problem that I think Russia's been addressing. They've been developing airports domestically, and also linking more travel between a kind of short destination travel between cities. And I think that we will see. I mean, one of the problems still that the prices are quite different. You know, prices in Moscow and St. Petersburg, they tend to be lower than prices in other places, especially in the Far East. And I think with this facilitation of travel, I think what we'll see, we're likely to see something. For example, the phenomena that happened in Russia in the 90s. Even though obviously the economic situation is very different, when there were people, traders, small traders traveling and bringing goods from Turkey and from other places to Russia, where there was lack of goods. I think, but now what we'll see is that people will start traveling directly to China, not only from Vladivostok or from other cities in the Far East, but also from the Urals, from central kind of Russia, from Moscow and St. Petersburg. So I think that's going to affect a lot of things. I think Russians will start bringing that. I think there'll be more trade. I think one of the problems for Russians in the past was they were even this official kind of trading channels. And you would always find adverts for people who basically had visas to travel to China, and they were they called themselves kind of authorized traders or whatever, representing Chinese companies. So these guys, if you wanted to place an order with the Chinese for a large delivery of something, a large scale kind of a container or so on and so forth, you would have to go through this kind of trading channel. You couldn't go yourself because of visa restrictions. But now I think the story will change tremendously in that respect, because I think more and more people will travel to facilitate. It will facilitate business ties with China tremendously. I think we'll see that in the next 12 months, see what kind of change that's going to bring.
Yeah. I think we've been reading. I mean, the Siberian pipeline too is not, certainly is not something new. I think it's been in the works for quite some time. But it does look
Mm.
like after this recent SEO, this is going to become a reality. You see a very high chance of it succeeding. Uh, you see, and it's going
Yes,
to.
it will succeed. I think there are reservations. Obviously, they tend to be in sort
The
of
advantage, yeah. Mm.
Western media circles. Some experts, I even remember when the first Power of Siberia pipeline was built, some experts were even questioning that pipeline. They say we don't need to build any pipelines to China. Russia doesn't need to build any pipelines to China because its principal market is in Europe. Europe pays higher prices, and there is also an issue of monopsony. There is one dominant buyer, China, whereas in Europe, there was several buyers. But that also changed because Europeans unified their energy space, so to speak.
Yeah.
But over the years, that's proven the right strategy that Russia started diversifying into Asia. So that's something of importance.
Just want to bring back a point where you just mentioned just now, which I think my audience will find it interesting, is that uh, during the Soviet Union days, Europe used to buy Russian oil
And
from
gas.
for and gas from the Soviet Union.
Yes,
Mm. So it
they were
is.
buying it from lots of sources, but one of the principal sources of especially of natural gas became
Mm-hmm,
the Soviet Union, because gas was cheap,
mm-hmm,
and for Soviet oilmen, the so-called, there is a lot of associated gas, basically gas associated with oil production. So when you extract oil, there is a lot of gas. So
mm-hmm.
what they did, they tended to flare this gas, burn it basically, because they didn't need it.
Yeah.
There was no market for it. So when this obviously new market emerged, they started not only flaring it, but also using
Yeah.
that gas to deliver it to
Right.
to Europe.
So your
But
Yolo region. Is that the region that was that supplied into the Nord Stream pipeline too, or is it a different place?
Well, there are different uh, uh, the Yamal Europe pipeline was basically a pipeline that brought Russian gas from Yamal Peninsula and West Siberia to Poland and Germany. That was
Mm-hmm.
basically the idea. So and obviously now there are discussions about that Europe basically lost its source base, because even in the old times, for example, some of Russian experts suggested, and also not only experts but also energy policymakers, they were suggesting to China to bring gas exactly from the same sources
Mm.
as gas that is being delivered to Europe. And at the time, Chinese said it's not a good idea. We don't want to compete with Europe and for that gas. So that was a smart idea in terms of Russians. Basically, you basically bring gas, you deliver gas to the market that is more profitable. And
Mm.
they at the time they also wanted to kind of boost their bargaining position in relations with Europe. But
Mm.
now, obviously, the geopolitical situation changed tremendously. Russia realizes, I think Chinese policymakers realize that the European gas market is basically being shut down for Russian gas.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as a result, it's basically becoming a principal source of gas deliveries now to China. And I think that's Europe obviously could get gas in the future from Russia, but uh, we will need to wait and see. Many things could change in the next sort of 5 to 10 years. But I think that uh, we're not very optimistic in the relationship with in terms of relationship with Europe. I think that's we're probably for quite a long kind of worsening of relationships for the next sort of 10,
It's
15
a
years.
it's a real shame. I mean, obviously, for Russia, I mean, this
Yeah,
pipeline
for Russia and for Europe, it was a mutual kind of relationship, and Europe is now moving more towards.
worked for so long, it's worked so well for so long, and and
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was. Uh, yeah, it's been quite a long relationship as well, and I think that's brought quite a lot of revenues for Gazprom, and it's actually enabled for Gazprom to maintain low gas prices domestically.
hmm hmm
Because it could get compensated, uh, from this, large scale revenues coming from Europe for literally subsidized, gas prices within Russia. But that's been changing as well, in that relationship. Russia is now engaged in a major gasification, of Russian regions as well.
hmm
And
hmm
because the capacity of Russian market, domestic market, is basically similar to that of Europe in terms of its size.
yeah,
The important thing is that to have deliveries of make sure that there is infrastructure in place for gas to be delivered to consumers within Russia. And so that's another important aspect, and also bring prices gradually, make those prices competitive as well.
yeah.
I know. So we'll see many tremendous changes. I think Europe is probably, even though they've been talking about this, there are some optimists who basically say, oh, maybe at some point Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 will restart and start delivering gas to Germany. But I'm some kind of skeptical about that. I think that we probably lost Europe. And in the future, if Europe wants Russian gas, I think a lot of that gas would probably come from Russian LNG supplies. But
hmm
again, let's wait and see what happens. But I think that in the next 10, 15 years, Europe is probably going to go through terminal decline because of high prices for energy.
hmm
Because they failed. I think one important thing, for example, the difference between China and Europe
hmm
is that European Union, they really failed to synchronize transition between different types of energy.
Okay.
China has been doing the synchronization in a much better way, because China's been developing domestic energy resources.
Mhm.
It's been using still it is still continues to use coal,
Oh,
and
yes, correct.
still builds coal firing power plants, even though they use different types of technology, so they're not
Polluting.
polluting for the environment. And they've been investing in renewables, domestic oil and gas production and things like that. So they've been synchronizing the process, and European leaders criticized China for still using coal-fired power plants,
Australia
and actually
actually took
building new ones. And China
Australia.
said it's an important backup source for us. We don't want to be in a situation when we basically have a major energy crisis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas Europeans, they've really, I mean, in Germany, they started closing nuclear power stations. They've actually another aspect that I forgot to mention is that China is also heavily investing in the development of nuclear energy, and
Yeah.
this nuclear energy is also becoming an important aspect of not only Chinese internal consumption, but also China wants to compete on a global scale in terms of as
AI.
a provider of nuclear energy.
Right.
So it's a kind of I think Chinese learned a lot from European mistakes. The
Mm,
fact that Europe really, they've been talking about renewable energy, but they have not delivered. For example, when it comes to hydrogen development, they've been talking about developing hydrogen industry for a while, but a lot of their policies are still have not really reached the planned kind of schedule. So that's I think that's in some ways it's a shame for no, for Europe. Obviously, it's not a great thing for Russia that it's losing. It's almost lost that market. But another important thing to mention in that respect is that in my time when I was a fellow at Oxford Institute for Energy Studies, we had discussions. I remember about gas in Europe, and a lot of experts at the time, even back in 2006, 7, was suggesting that European market is not really an interesting market, will not be an interesting market in the years to come, because of it really is not going to be an economic powerhouse in the
mm,
future. The economic powerhouse will be in Asia Pacific, and this is where the major consumers will be based. So even back then, almost over 20 years ago, people already saw, they could
mm,
forecast the way things were changing. I think that, and it's going to change even more
mm.
due to fast development of Asia,
Yeah.
because I think we see Chinese success story. There could be some hiccups in a way, as often happens. For example, you may remember the Asian financial crisis
Oh, yeah.
of
Absolutely.
97,
Yes.
and there was actually that led to a collapse of prices of energy,
Mm,
but within quite a short period of time Asia
yeah.
and actually there was fast economic growth.
Mm,
So we may have, I don't want to sort of predict kind of a crisis in the future, but even if there are hiccups
yep.
on the way, I think that Asia is will be the king of
Mm,
energy consumption in the next sort of 10, 15 years, maybe longer,
yeah.
because
Right.
it would need to ensure
Mm.
competitiveness when it comes to energy prices.
Yeah, it would seem to me that although this pipeline is yes, of course, it's very important, but that's not the only thing that is actually determining the geopolitical dynamics between Russia and China, because this pipeline obviously is a cornerstone. It really is. I think I cannot overemphasize how important this is, because this really is the cornerstone of Russia's pivot to Asia strategy. Um, but what surprises us here is that having something like this that is so significant, that the European Union is unable to see this, and yet they agree um, to play along with the United States. I think it's something that we can't fathom. Maybe perhaps you could explain to
I
us,
think that
European, European
my
mindset.
yeah, my impression is that for Europeans, the most important thing at the moment is security. Uh, and they realize that the only country that can ensure their security, their defense in the
Mm,
military terms, is the
mm,
United States. Because it's I think that's one important aspect, and the second aspect is the fact that Europe is going through a major crisis. European countries are going through major domestic economic and political crisis as well. Look at what's happening in Europe, for example, in UK, in France, in
right.
Germany.
Many.
Um, and I think that they need this kind of, I'll be very blunt. They need an external kind of enemy projection
Mm.
in order to ensure the kind of
Yeah, but this is shooting yourself in the foot.
yes, but unfortunately, there have been many
Not
cases like this.
strategic,
I mean, First World War happened between countries which were highly interdependent economically, and they were growing fast economically, and they still ended up, being involved in a war which devastated their countries. Russia was devastated, and the German Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, they were all devastated as a result.
Mm,
It led actually to fragmentation of those countries, led to revolution in Russia and a civil war.
mm,
So that was not. But again, they still go ahead. The political leaders, they
mm,
still go ahead with the war.
mhm,
I think
mhm,
that I'm not saying that there'll be a war between Russia and Europe. I think that there could be some skirmishes, I would say, in the next sort of 10 maybe 15 years on Russian borders. But I think we'll need to wait and see. But again, like I said, in history, we have examples
mm,
when politicians make decisions which are very counterproductive in terms of the economic interests of their nations.
mhm. So with this latest pipeline, I for so long, for the last 50, 60 years, we've been so dependent on oil from the Middle East. Um, with this pipeline, with such a large stream coming on, do you find that the POS tool will actually play a role in diversifying to actually to maybe I should put it this way. Yeah, I see it stabilizing oil prices
It could make a, I mean, it could make a
rather than
certain impact,
see
but I think that, but
the crashes that we used to see, like 1972, and in 1997, as you say, and even 2020, if you remember, I think oil prices was something like negative, for a little while, if you remember that, in 2020 during COVID, that when everybody was like
yeah, prices went down to minus
negative,
30.
yeah,
Yes,
minus 30 or
in the trading in
yeah,
the kind of paper oil
right.
markets. Yes.
Right, correct. So do you see, I mean, for China, I think it's I mean, for Russia, definitely is strategic. For China, is also strategic because I believe Qatar actually supplies about 24% of its LNG to China. And I can imagine China may not, given what's happening in the Middle East, may not want to actually put all the eggs in one basket in one region. So I think for China, it's something that is good for them, and I think that is probably what motivates both Russia and China to make sure that this pipeline actually works. But actually, on a global scale, do you find that this is also good for all of us in the rest of the world in terms of price stability?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I think that's
Because you're diversifying the sources, right? So if there's anything that happens in the Middle East or elsewhere, we've got
yeah.
we've
The, the,
got
the
the
key the key question is that what these sources are used for. I think that's one important aspect is uh, uh, the use of what kind of fuel is being used for transport, because transport is a major consumer of energy. We've been talking about there have been lots of talks about the so-called electrification of transport, but it's been quite slow. And I think we're still heavily dependent on oil,
Mm,
crude oil for refined products being used for refined products. fuel fuel transport sector. I think that's something important to remember. Obviously, gas can be used for a number of for transport as well. So we'll need to wait and see. But I think that obviously it will create the most important thing. It will create competitive edge, as I said, for countries in terms of especially for China in terms of the prices of energy. But I think that's another important aspect in this respect to remember, to probably mention, whether we will see fragmentation of on a global scale, something I mentioned in one of our first discussions when I talk about the Rubik's Cube, is whether we will see fragmentation and into kind of alliances or platforms where countries would say, we will buy only from this or from this kind of set of sources. We will not buy, let's say, in the case of China, China could say we will not buy gas from the United States. That's actually happened in the case of for example, recently in the case of tariff wars with between the United States and China. China started sort of buying less American LNG, and I think that's and there's something similar we saw in the 70s when the European Union started buying gas from the Soviet Union as a way of kind of giving its competitive edge and diversifying away from regions which they perceived as using energy weapon against them. So that's an important, I think, geopolitical aspect to remember.
Yeah.
Keep in mind.
The way I see that, I mean, obviously, Donald Trump is also recently tried that they've actually asked Europeans to impose 100% tariff on China, uh, so that to put pressure on the Europeans to I'm sometimes I'm so confused by some of his strategies. Basically, uh, the Europeans look at sanctions as part of foreign policy and tariffs as part of negotiations, whereas Trump looks at sanctions as negotiations and tariffs uh, as foreign policy. So I think things well, I mean, maybe it's a strategy to try to turn things around. But I can see that the Europeans, while you say that they are they have stopped or will stop buying LNG from Russia completely by 2027, but they
Not only LNG, hydrocarbons, oil
hydrocarbons,
and
yeah, oil
gas,
and gas,
everything.
everything, yeah, everything. I think oil and gas, I think, was no, oil was actually earlier, so gas was, I think, right up to 2027. So anyhow, but they stopped short at imposing tariffs on China. Uh, Tell us why.
My guess is the following: Europeans been putting a lot of pressure on Trump, and they've been asking him, you should put more sanctions on Russia, that Russia would stop its special military operation, come to the negotiation table and things like that. And I think for Trump, it's a kind of response because he doesn't want to say no directly to Europeans because he's interested actually in rebuilding relationship with Russia for a number of reasons that I can later on elaborate on.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
And so he doesn't want basically to impose sanctions on Russia. And he said, okay, guys, I will impose sanctions on Russia as long as you impose sanctions on China and on India.
Mm-hmm.
But that will be because he knows that they will not be able to do that. They're highly dependent on rare earth materials from China. They're highly dependent on a number of technological decisions. For example, even their automotive industry is dependent on some Chinese supplies.
Mm-hmm.
A number of their sectors are dependent on Chinese supplies. When it comes to India, you mentioned quite rightly about Russian oil deliveries being kind of ceased, although some oil still being delivered to Europe, especially places like Hungary and Slovakia.
Mm-hmm.
Hungary gets via Druzhba pipeline, which been also been attacked during this kind of military crisis between Russia and Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the petroleum products that Europe was buying, for example, from Russia, started coming from India. And what India
Right.
happens is that India would buy Russian oil, they refine this Russian oil, and then sell petroleum products from Europe. So if they impose sanctions on India, they will not get petroleum products from India. So I think it's going to have devastating consequences if they go ahead and impose sanctions on China and India, taking into account the current state of economy, European economy, and there is already political crisis in a number of countries in Europe. I mentioned the UK, France, especially, and Germany to a certain degree. So I think that's the Trump's kind of response, saying, "Yeah, guys, I'm going to go ahead and impose sanctions as long as you impose tariffs, higher tariffs on China and India."
Yeah,
So
but this,
it's
yeah, correct.
kind of his way of getting rid of the pressure that they're putting on him. But
So
when
like,
it comes to something I mentioned, when it comes to relationship between the United States and Russia, it's not only about Trump wants to get Nobel Prize because he would basically be the peacemaker in terms of this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. I think that's not really the reason. It may
mm-hmm,
not be the main reason.
mm-hmm.
The main reason is that the US needs rare earth minerals. They need access to alternative non-Chinese supplies or supplies from other places. But China is a dominant force when it comes to processing of rare earth minerals and materials. Almost 90% is actually controlled by China. That's one aspect. Second aspect is the US really wants to get involved in one way or another in Russian energy projects, in Russian logistical projects, especially the Northern Sea route, because Northern Sea route is the only route that the US doesn't have any control of when it comes to international transportation routes.
Interesting.
So in that respect, he needs a kind of rapprochement with Russia. Um, so he sees it that way. So there are other aspects as well, but I think that um, for Russians, I think that obviously they would like to have a better relation with the United States, but there is also a number of Russian experts are quite skeptical about kind of long-term relationship with the US because let's say after 28 there is a new president in Washington, and that president is not let's say he's a Democrat. The Republicans, let's say if they lose the elections, then we'll back to square one. Basically, Biden kind of US policies towards Russia.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We've seen that in for example in the US relationship with Iran. Obama tried to basically restart or renegotiate relationship with Iran, and when Trump came back, he basically canceled
Yeah,
all
he
the
threw it out.
achievements.
Exactly.
So it's not, we have again an example.
Mm,
Uh,
mm,
so in that respect, it's one aspect. The second aspect is Russians realize that the real economic powerhouse of the future is in Asia. It's not in Europe.
mm,
Okay?
mm.
So I think that we're probably seeing the first steps, or maybe second steps towards a major strategic relationship between Russia and China, but not only Russia and China, but also Russia and other Asian countries. I think increasingly Russians are being, developing ties with your country, with Malaysia.
Yeah, it's certainly very
Uh,
new for us.
yes, with
Yeah.
with seeing a good relationship improvements with Vietnam
Mm-hmm.
and other places in Asia. So I mentioned to you I think in our one of our last previous podcasts
Yeah.
that there was an increase of tourism between Russia and Vietnam in just 1 year by 204, I think over 200%, 240% or something like that in just 1 year. And I think we're probably going to see something of the same scale when it comes to tourism from Russia to China.
Oh, that one is without a doubt. I mean, the Chinese when they come into your country, it will be I tell you, you won't even be able to cope. China is a different it's a different ball game. It's the kind of scale that they deal with is something that we've never, it's not it cannot be replicated anywhere else. Which is yeah, which is kind of good and bad because it does get overwhelming. Um, Coming back to Europe and Russia. Uh, of late, there has been talks about UK and France going into an IMF bailout situation. And what you see, happening on the streets and so on, it is a reflection on the kind of political turmoil that's going on in Europe. And I also remember a couple of podcasts ago, you did say that Europe is looking to you know, escalate a kind of very serious conflict with Russia by year 2030. And then you hear Germany now converting their car manufacturing capacity to military equipment. And this has been done before, like you say, in World War I and World War II. How are they going to do it this time, given that energy cost is going to be so expensive? And secondly, your population is slowing down. You have a very high migrant population. There is so much friction and instability within the societies. It's not a one European society anymore. How how are they going to put this together? I'm trying to,
Obviously, for them, militarization in some ways, yes, it's probably a way out, as some political leaders in Europe see. They probably think, we will, we have problems with our automotive industry because it's not as competitive as it used to be in comparison to, for example, Chinese, manufacturers.
mm-hmm,
I've talked actually to a German colleague of mine, I think a couple of years ago, where he talked about the German automotive industry, and he said our problem, he said, that we focused too much on a combustion engine instead of electric vehicles, and we're about 15 years behind China. And that's actually was quite a bit of a revelation to me, 15 years behind China, because in the old days, obviously, German manufacturing, car
yeah,
manufacturing was considered top,
that's the way ahead.
top of, yeah. And I think probably some policymakers saw that this militarization is a way out, in terms of orders and things like that. But
Do you
the
think it will
problem,
work?
sorry?
Do you think it will work?
No, I don't
Looking
think
at
it's going
look
to
at
work
look
because
at
high
looking,
prices. You
yeah.
already answered your own question. High energy prices. You cannot, competitively develop certain sectors of your economy if you are not as competitive. I mean, one of the
How
problems,
yeah.
for example, for Germany, the German petrochemical concerns, a chemical kind of conglomerates, they slow down the production of fertilizers
Mm,
because of high gas prices. And instead, domestic consumers started buying fertilizers from Russia. And I think it went fourfold, something like that, the purchase of Russian fertilizers by Europeans at some point. So what could see that they could make an attempt, but end up buying military equipment from the United States because it would be cheaper to produce there. I don't even rule out that some of the manufacturing base of German manufacturing will move to the United States. So that's the only way they can deal with this challenge.
wow.
But I personally think I think that I said it a while ago. I said it actually back in 2022
Mm-hmm.
at some number of meetings. I think including there was one meeting of experts in here in Moscow,
Yeah.
organized by a media outlet called Delaware Petersburg. And I said because of energy challenges, I think Europe will have severe problems within a sort of 5 years, and we're already seeing evidence of that now. I think that's I personally think that they've entered the stage of terminal decline, which is going to last up to 15 years, 10, 15
Oh,
years. So
it
that's
will be more because in 10, 15 years, China and Russia will be in a different space and Asia will be in a different place altogether. In terms of our education, in terms of the banking sector and everything, it will be way, way ahead. It's
I even mentioned to you, the exchanges between students going to Asia now. Increasing number of students going into international programs in China, not to Europe, not to the United States. That's also an indicator.
yeah.
I have Chinese students at High School of Economics as my
Mm,
students. They speak fluent Russian.
yeah.
You
Mm,
know, so it's a major change. In that respect. I think it's a tectonic move.
it
And
is. It
I
is.
absolutely agree with you. In the next 10 years, the world will be completely different. The problem, I think, I see that there could be conflicts. I don't think that the next 10, 15 years will be as stable as, for example, the years after the Second World War or the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Mm,
I think that's in some ways because of uh, regional conflicts are likely to happen because countries will trying to position themselves to capture kind of more resources and not only I'm not talking about energy necessarily. I'm talking about economic resources and things like that. And
mm,
another aspect will be the fact that the US is likely to start withdrawing from the global scale. We're already seeing that happening under Trump. I think it's going to speed up. And as a result, there'll be something that can be described as the wars for American inheritance.
mm,
I think
mm.
that's another threat, another risk that we may witness as well.
It's really sad. I mean, what you're describing now, what's happening in Europe is, you see an economic decline because of some strategic calculations. One
I
of
mean,
them,
they calculated, to be honest, they calculated back in 2022. They thought
oh,
that Russia would collapse by the end of the year.
correct. So I think
Uh,
it's a very serious miscalculation on their part, and then I think it's going to cost them, generations to come. And it is quite sad also that despite understanding and seeing the collapse from within, it's so convenient now to uh push the blame to the others, migrants. Okay, the reason why our streets are so dirty is not because we can't afford to clean them, it's because of the migrants. And that is fueling, all this internal conflict, which makes things worse. It's like, hey guys,
yes, I agree. Especially, it's quite evident for example, in the UK at the moment. Some people even talk about potential civil war taking place
correct.
in the UK
Yeah,
because
I mean, your streets are dirty because you're not cleaning them. It's not because of migrants, right? I mean, your housing your council housing is in a state of ruin. It's because it's not maintained, not because.
potholes as well is a problem. I mean, it was not the case before in the UK. I mean, I lived in the UK for a long time. And I think that the deterioration usually happens very fast. It's gradual, but then it becomes faster and faster and faster. I think
Mm,
that's the problem.
it
I
is.
think the UK did quite a lot of miscalculations. I think that the Brexit vote wasn't the way it was done. It really undermined economic development of the UK, economic stability.
Mm,
Then the fact that COVID-19, of course, made quite a negative impact. Then some of
yeah.
the decisions of politicians in relations to deals with other countries,
Mm,
because I think after Brexit, the UK really hoped that they'll sign this as a sort of super deal with the United States. And the deal they signed is not really such a great thing, really. So Donald Trump is now visiting the UK now, but I think that still I don't think much will come out of that visit when it comes to the UK. I think we will see major changes in terms of politics, because probably Keir Starmer is not going to last beyond next summer, next spring.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be somebody else, unless they call the elections. If they postpone the elections, then we're likely to see, Nigel Farage, who is the head of the, I don't know,
Yeah,
he
the
used to be the head
Conservative
of
Party,
Brexit Party, now head of
uh,
Reform Party,
one
and they're
party.
getting more and more. Yeah, it's a far right. He's against, migrants. He's also he's basically a kind of Trumpian character. He's a very close friend of Donald Trump, as you know.
Yeah,
So we'll see this kind of more nationalist
right-wing,
forces
correct,
coming to
right-wing,
power in Europe.
conservative, the AfD, the
Yeah, and
parties.
my only kind of problem with those guys is that I don't think they really have an economic vision, even if they come to power. I think they will not be able to solve problems that Europe is facing, because some of these problems have become quite embedded. You
Because
know,
I mean, you can blame the migrants for your dirty streets, okay, but if you were to send them all back, your entire consumption, the consumption part of your economy is just going to collapse. It's just going to make it worse.
I mean, the same problem they had after Brexit, because a lot of migrants, we can call them migrants, people who basically moved from Europe,
Mm,
especially from Poland, from the Baltics, they really were fueling British economy.
correct.
They're providing services. They were involved in manufacturing. They were involved in building, construction, and things like that.
Mm,
And after Brexit, a lot of these people left, and there was shortage of labor. And they still, I mean, the shortage of labor is a problem everywhere.
yeah,
But it was especially tremendous in the UK, when I think there was a point when they said that they don't have enough truck drivers.
yeah,
They I think lacked more than 150,000 truck drivers. They needed more. That's basically, if you don't have 150,000 truck drivers, imagine the negative impact that makes on the economy.
yeah, yeah.
That's just one example. But obviously, with electrification with basically with robotization
Mm.
of cars.
UK is not an early adopter of such technology.
No, no. I think it's the China has been testing,
Yeah,
as far as I know, this technology. The United States and also Russia increasingly. We have now vehicles that are not run by people when in testing mode. But I think within the next 3 years, I think we'll see more and more lorries being used. Maybe 5 years, which will not be operated by humans.
yeah. It's interesting. I'm just going to go back to the point that you made just now, and I thought this is something that I didn't see before. Why Donald Trump's really interested in the Northern Sea Route, because that's the only sea route that the United States is not involved in. Um, the and here we are on the Asian side, um, Asia side. The way we see that move is to split. Basically, the intention was to split Russia and China.
That train has passed. It's gone. It's long gone. I think it's not
I know
going.
they're still talking about it.
It's
So
not.
we're still
It's not
talking. Yeah,
important. It's not a question of importance. I think it's like I said. It's impossible to do that now. They
yeah,
should have done it if they wanted to really do it now. They should have done it about 10 years ago. you know, uh, Back in 2014, after the first kind of crisis in Ukraine, where Crimea became part of Russia. I think
mm,
that's. I think Europe and Russia and the United States really lost Russia in that respect. I think, uh,
and the
like I
reason
said,
why,
like
yeah,
I said to you, for Russians realize one thing: long-term deals with the United States will be challenging to implement for reasons I've explained to you already. The fact that if there is a change of president, there could be complete reversal of policies.
mm,
And the second important thing is that the real economic powerhouse is in Asia
yeah,
and will be in Asia in the
yeah,
years to come.
yeah. It's for us. You can understand our insecurity, and our insecurity is not because of anything. Everyone's afraid of change, and the fact that we can feel the withdrawal of the West from Asia little bit by little bit, it's quite scary. Okay, it's quite scary. And when we see Russia and China together, it's like, oh, thank God we have something. We at least thank God we can see something on the table as an alternative. It's very
Yeah.
nascent, it's very new, but at least it's something, right? It's better than looking around like, okay, we don't have nothing. And for us, that stability, that the heartland, you have Russia back to back with China, and,
Yes.
and that provides the ballast, if you like, uh, because we know, as you said, the next 10 years is going to be very, very tough. And I was just talking to someone the other day, and I said, okay, how do you see the Malaysian economy going forward? You can't plan so far. I think the most, even as a business, your longest horizon is 5 years. Even then, I think maybe half of it you're expecting it not to even play out because the market is fragmenting, coming back together. It looks kind of like before, but not quite what it is, and everyone's scrambling, trying to look for new markets, trying to look for new clients. And as you know, relationships are always very difficult to build. I mean, it takes trust, it takes time, it takes
It
resources.
takes at least 2 years, at least,
Yeah,
but
at least.
sometimes it takes 3 to 5 years.
So I was talking to someone, and I said, "Look, how do you see Malaysian in ASEAN?" And of course, when you are living in your own country, you have so many complaints, right? This is not right. Prices are going up. Education system is not right. Our children are, our society is falling apart. There's all these complaints. And he says, and this friend of mine said, "Look, given that it feels like nothing is moving, okay, feels like nothing is moving, but 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 in the overall scheme of things, Asia is probably going to be the relatively stable place to be."
Yes, I agree. I agree. Russia as well, actually.
Russia
I
as
would
well.
say
There's
Russia as
no,
well. Despite
yeah,
despite the progress, I think,
yeah.
yeah, the world is falling apart, and I think the issue is which
Like,
places are
thank
the
God,
most stable.
right? It's like always like, thank God these two guys are friends. Thank God they have this, they have the right minds and the right head to sit down and say, okay, let's think rationally for our people. Let's think rationally for the world. Let's think rationally for the region. What's best? Okay. I mean, I don't know whether we've been friends before or whether we were. I mean, it's so fortunate that you find two countries like this that have leaders that are sane and rational.
Yes, yes, that's
you know,
important thing.
you know, not tweeting and and saying one thing one day, and I
Or
mean,
implementing policy via social media. Yes.
yeah. So it's like thank God. So I know I keep coming back to this thing about, oh, the friendship, because it's so pivotal for us that this friendship continues, because that our businesses, our long-term plans, our future, I think for the next 10 years is pivotal on this relationship. No, the stability of this relationship,
Yes.
the
Yes.
consolidation, and the validity, the solidness of this relationship and this friendship is just so crucial for all of us on this side of the planet. Because when the storm comes, I mean, as you said, on your west, you have Europe. I mean, I don't, I'm not sure who else can help them. And and I feel that North America is going through its own cathartic moment. I suppose they're also due for a change after 300 years. I mean, like all
Yeah,
empires.
they'll focus mostly on domestic matters. I think they will gradually withdraw from the global scale. This is a question of the next 15 years,
Yeah,
20
but
years,
I
for the
think
years.
yeah, I think given that they've got, unlike Europe, they have a different they have a different mindset. They still have that pioneering mindset, and plus they have, it's a big country. They still have a lot of resources. They still have a lot of good brains. They still have a lot of people who are innovative. So I
Americans change on the dime, as they say, so they can adapt quite quickly
they can, they
to
can. It's
changing environments. They're very highly entrepreneurial, and also another important aspect, they have natural resources. I'm not talking about rare earths, but I'm talking
Yeah,
about oil and gas.
correct. They
That
have
will give them a competitive edge.
correct, and plus they have still have good institutions if they know how to preserve them properly, and at the end of the day it's still a pioneering society, right? They did go out there and make a living despite a huge hostile environment, and I think it will make it, but it's going to take some time, and unfortunately while all this is happening, hopefully they're not going to drag all of us down in this huge fireball.
The US is definitely needs to scale down the exposure internationally because I think it's become a bit of a burden for them as well. And Trump is trying to solve that through tariffs and things like that. He wants to fast track it, but I think that's I'm not in terms of fast track it. I'm not sure how successful that policy will be. We'll need to wait and see. But again, yeah, I think you rightly put it. Americans they're much more adaptable to very severe, often challenging environment. I think that's important. That's also I agree with you in that
They
respect.
have a big
I
landmass.
think the US will still will be one of the major powers in the years to come, but they'll just be scaling down their exposure externally and
Mm,
focusing on in some ways reinventing themselves
mm,
domestically
mm.
and dealing with internal domestic challenges because the country is highly divided as well as
Yeah,
we've seen in with latest
yeah,
events. You
correct.
know, so but we need to wait and see. But again, unfortunately, I don't have very good news when it comes to geopolitical conflicts. I think that we're up for the next 10, 15 years for a lot of kind of roller coaster
Where?
evolution again. It's a roller coaster evolution, but the humanity is evolving and moving to a new level.
Okay, for you, what is the next flashpoint, militarily speaking?
Oh, I think that it's the Middle East. I would say probably Iran, Israel, US kind of conflict. I'm not sure whether the US will really want to get involved in that, but I think that Israel is likely to, there could be conflict between Iran and Israel. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's second. Probably, we'll probably see some kind of issues over the Kaliningrad and the Baltics um, because they've been caused by some, policymakers, military, even military kind of policymakers in Europe to basically block Kaliningrad. Because Kaliningrad is an enclave which is doesn't
Right.
really have
Yeah.
a border with Russia. It's surrounded by Baltic countries. So I can potentially see a flashpoint in the Baltics in the next. I would say probably starting 28, 30, kind of that period. Could be later, could be a year earlier. It depends. Because as I explained to you, I think politicians often see conflict as a way of solving domestic issues.
Yep. Yep.
So
Comes
you
to.
always need, it's always been the case, either you look for internal enemy, which is very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen examples in history, and we're seeing examples in history now. We don't need to necessarily use history. People blaming foreigners who come to
Yep.
their countries.
Correct.
Um, and during Nazi times, Hitler blamed the Jews for problems,
Mm-hmm.
in Germany, and that led to genocide and Holocaust and some
Yep.
horrible things like that.
Correct.
And we've seen some unpleasant stories in Asia as well. Europeans are not aware of issues during Second World War, for example, in Asia.
Yep.
And I think that's or they blame the external enemy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the easiest way. So hopefully the level of conflicts will be small
Mm.
because something that we've noticed. I mean, if you notice, in relations to recent conflicts. Then they're not on a large scale. They're not large scale
Yeah.
conflicts.
Yeah.
They like happen and then they basically disappear, and then they happen and they disappear. They're not lasting. Obviously, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict is going on for since 2022. But even that is not really a large-scale war,
Yeah.
because Russia has not really declared war. It has not imposed 100% conscription and things like that. So
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting because I thought before we end the show, um, I thought it was very strange, and I it could be a strategy, a geopolitical strategy on the part of Trump. I mean, sometimes he plays some interesting cards, and it's like, oh, okay. I felt this whole thing with Venezuela, Maduro. I felt that it was a little bit of I could be wrong, but do you think it could be a distraction, as if to say to the Israelis, I don't really want to go to Middle East because
it could be, yes, it
I'm
could be. They
busy.
could pick.
I'm busy with
Yeah.
my backyard.
It's similar with Trump's strategy when it comes to Europe, where he says impose tariffs, higher tariffs on India and China, then I'll impose sanctions on Russia. It's a kind of, I think, similar. I agree with you, similar approach, because uh,
Like, why are you sending ships to Venezuela for what, you know? And then it's like this whole thing, and putting 50 million bounty on a sitting president of a foreign country. I mean, come on, it it sounds a little bit like a bit of a game.
yeah, I think it will be a good excuse for the US if they get high more if the level of conflict will go reach a higher kind of degree.
mm,
The US could say to both Europeans and Israelis, basically saying, we cannot, guys, get more involved or help you one way or another. We are washing our hands, so to speak,
because
and
this is
because we've got other issues.
it'll be devastating for America to go to a war with Iran, because Iran is no Iraq. And number two, it took them 2 years to manufacture consent of the Americans before they went into Iraq. And right now, American public opinion is so split on the Middle East. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be
Yeah,
easy.
it's not going to be easy, but also, yes, we've seen what happened in Vietnam. Even though I was not around back then. I was not born yet, but we've seen the kind of we've seen pictures in Afghanistan where people were hanging to planes as the US was leaving and falling down. I think it's Americans don't want to get involved in wars. I think that's they really want to address domestic problems, and domestic problems are also quite severe.
Yeah.
You have highly divided society, highly divided politically, which
Mm,
is also sad, to
yeah.
see.
Yeah.
And people go and use weapons to basically score political points or kill their opponents,
Yeah.
ideological opponents. It's also,
We're gonna see.
a very dangerous path for a country to take.
That's right. Someone is saying that the assassination of Charlie Kirk, for example, was a high-level political assassination, and we may, or United States may actually see more of such things to come, just like in the 60s. I mean, that is.
Yeah, like I said, obviously they may have again. It's a solvable solution. I've probably seen the film Wag the Dog, where you have a war as a way of basically dealing with
Correct.
domestic issues. But I don't think the United States can really afford getting involved in a large scale or several large scale military conflicts. I don't think I don't think the society in the United States is really up for that.
Not at
I
the
think
moment. Not at the moment.
I think
I think it's not
that will cause
easy.
more problems.
It's
And
not.
I think Trump knows it. I think
Yeah,
that's
I think so. It's getting, that uh, I mean, you can't go to war unless you have, consent. If you don't, you're gonna have more riots at home than soldiers in wherever you are.
one
Anyway,
important aspect I would like to say is that um, despite You mentioned in your earlier comments some of the sort of issues you have in Asia and in your country in Malaysia, that people are very concerned about their future.
Yeah.
But every crisis is an opportunity in disguise. I
Mm.
mentioned that
Yeah,
before.
absolutely.
I think it will be an opportunity, especially for smaller countries, to become a kind of connector countries. I mentioned that
Mm,
previously,
mm,
between different blocks,
mm,
between
mm.
different countries. But I think for Malaysia, I think you have good relationship with Europe. You have good relationship with US. With China,
Generally,
with other
we're okay.
countries.
Yeah, it's just that.
So as long as it's a quite a challenging balancing act. I agree when you have to deal with huge players.
Mhm.
But also it offers you a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, generally speaking, I think things are good in terms of our relationship with all the superpowers, whether it's US, Europe, and these are of course all players for us. Now having to deal with, no, as long as the superpowers don't fight, we're okay. We're okay.
Yes, yes. But
Yeah,
even for people business-wise, I think you are now seeing many opportunities opening up to doing business
yeah.
internationally as well.
Right. Yeah, so it's no issue. We get along with everybody, and because we are not here to compete with anyone, and we have always been connectors, especially as maritime nations. But it's when your parents start fighting, that's when you're like looking left, looking right, looking left, looking right.
Yes,
That
yes,
is that is always the scary part, and then you listen to your mom, and then you're gonna get a beating from your dad. If you don't listen to your, dad, you're gonna get a scolding from. And you get
yes.
punished.
It's
You
actually
get
it's a good
punished.
way
You
of it's a good way of describing it. Yes,
get
it's quite similar to that. Yes.
you're caught in between two warring parents, and either way you're gonna get punished. You don't win. You don't win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Hopefully it doesn't get the way. Anyway, thank you so much, Shamil.
Oh,
It's
nice talking to you.
really, really a great
Thank
pleasure
you. And
to.
I really, it's been a pleasure to talk to you and to your audience.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Hi, welcome to the post analysis of episode 5, where I discussed the importance of the power of Siberia 2 pipeline and what it means in reshaping the new global order, and also mapping out a new global gas map for the world. As you know, the POS2, as it's known, it's about 2,600 kilometers long, stretching from China into through Mongolia and into uh, the Yamal Peninsula up north in Russia. And this is planned for 2030, and it is going to carry about 50 billion cubic meters of gas annually for the next 30 years. So it has a very big implication on geopolitics, for sure. And one of the key points of the Siberia pipeline is that it virtually replaces the Nord Stream 2, where gas used to be um, piped into Europe to fuel its manufacturing um, economy, especially for Germany. Now, having lost this supply, an important and crucial supply of gas, and it's going to have a huge implication on Europe's economy, especially in the area of manufacturing. And I think the country that will be the will be hit the worst is actually Germany. But what it means for China is that it, it, it helps China decarbonize its economy and to gain a competitive edge in the AI, especially because, as you know, AI will require a lot of energy, and this is going to be very crucial for China in terms of its energy mix, not having to rely on fossil fuels, but to actually have a combination, have a mixture of renewables, LNG, fossil oil, and also nuclear and coal, which China still uses. Coal is still among the main sources of energy for China. So we discussed a lot of about the basically the implications of the power of Siberia, and really this is a very what we see as another tipping point in geopolitics that will reshape the the new the new world, the new era, the new global map, uh, simply because the source of energy, the power of Siberia, the POS2, is going to reshape the entire balance of power globally, not just in Asia. So where we see the opportunities are, I suppose Dr. Shamil has always maintained that the world is actually fragmenting and that countries like Malaysia should continue to be on our toes to seek opportunities, where there are gaps and where there are turning points. We should recognize those turning points and see how best to leverage our country um, to some of these shifts in geopolitics. So again, I'm very grateful to Dr. Shamil for his time, and we will have him back in probably about a month's time, and to discuss any latest developments in Russia, which is actually happening on a weekly basis. So we can scarcely keep up with some of the issues and the events and turning points in in the world, whether it be it finance, be it military, be it economics. Something is always happening on a weekly basis in the globe. So we're living in a very special time, and we shouldn't miss our podcast, and stay with us so that you can find out the latest analysis and on the ground feedback from Russia. Thanks very much. See you in the next show. Thank you.